Greetings and welcome to another Lessons with Odin. This episode is the continuation of the Kanzashi hairclip type deal. Last week we made this 14mm Rivoli Cabochon type bezel thing featuring the new Zoliduo beads, and we're going to build up on this to create this monstrosity. This is the final version of the Kanzashi hairclip technique. So, you might have seen pictures of this posted all over my social media and in our Facebook group at Creations from Lessons with Odin. I will leave links down below to that. If you guys want to join us in our beady adventures, come and join a nice community of people who share their creations. But yes. So I figured this week I would show you guys how to make this. These Zoliduos were actually sent to me by Bead, so if you were looking for places to get your own and to try them out, I will leave links to Beads as well as their YouTube channel, because they also have some tutorials on their channel and their website. So if you're looking for more things to do, I highly recommend you check them out. So for this project you will need your completed 14mm Rivoli piece. There will be links either in the eye up here or down below on last week's tutorial, where it was the first part to finish this. So please be sure you've watched that and made your piece before you continue on to this one. If you haven't done this piece yet, there's also my impressions of the Zoliduo bead in that, and a kind of review in that video below, so I highly recommend you go and check that out. But yes, you will need a finished piece before you continue. You will also need 3 SS39 size Rivolis or Cabochons or what have you. It's about an 8mm, 8-ish millimeter type round or rhinestone if you don't want to work with the SS39. These are Swarovski, and you'll need 3 of them. You can coordinate colors or do whatever you feel like. You'll also need 4 little drops. I'm using 6mm top drilled bicones for this piece. In the previous one, I used some Briolettes beads, some Swarovski crystals, to dangle there. You will need 18 3mm rounds, or pearls. I haven't tried this with bicones yet, but feel free to experiment and see what your results are. If you're able to do these with bicones, feel free to share with us pictures, and because I would love to see what you come up with. 10 3mm fire polish rounds. Now, it doesn't really matter what colors these are, because they are going to be pretty hidden behind the piece. They're basically there to cinch everything together and attach all our pieces into one delightful component. And of course, our main event, the Zoliduos. I am separating mine in another tray, because I don't want to lose track of what side is what. But for this piece, you'll need about 30 of the right orientation and 24 of the left bead. And this number may vary depending on how long you want your fringe, but I'm going to be using 9 beads per fringe tail on my new piece. I've used 7 on this one, so whatever you feel you would like to do. You'd also need size 11 seed beads and size 15 seed beads, as well as a hair clip or whatever you are going to attach your piece on. You might just attach it on a chain or a cord of your own. But I'm going to put it in a hair clip because I don't make very many hair clips. And a dab of glue would also be very helpful. And of course, your needle and thread. I'm using a heavyweight Nymo and a size 12 needle for this project. But when attaching your piece to your clip, you might want something heavier, like a heavy fire line or something like that, so that the metal in the hair clip doesn't fray the threads. But up to you what you would like to use. Let us get started! So we are going to start off by creating our little satellite flowers using our little SS39 chatons. And that is super simple and super fast to throw together. We're going to start off by threading on a pattern of 1 size 11 seed bead and 1 Zoliduo 6 times so that we have 6 segments on our thread. Now we're using the same orientation bead for all 6 of these pieces. In this example I'm going to be using all right side ones. And make sure you thread them on the same orientation so that they all curve down or in the same direction, leaving a small tail just enough for a knot. Then I'm going to pass my needle back through them all until I form a loop. Then I'm going to take my working thread and my tail and tie an overhand knot. Then I'm going to pass through the next Zoliduo and the next seed bead over so that my knot gets stuck underneath a Zoliduo instead of a seed bead. I'm going to add one size 15 seed bead, one 3mm pearl, one size 15, jump over the next Zoliduo and pass directly through the next seed bead. This way the pearl sits right on top of the Zoliduo here. We're going to repeat that all the way around until we've covered all the Zoliduos. So then we end up with this messy situation over here. I'm going to then step up through the size 15 bead and then through the 3mm pearl. Then I'm going to take my SS39s and push it in the center. You're going to have to hold it a little snugly so that it stays in place. Then I'm going to add one size 15 seed bead and pass to the next 3mm pearl on our round. Then you'll repeat that all the way around until you've completed the set. Then you're going to reinforce once or twice to cinch everything together so that it holds the Rivoli in place. And after some frustrations, pulling and tugging, that is what you end up with. When you're reinforcing, it might be a bit of a struggle to get the 3mm pearls on top of the Rivoli, so just kind of keep picking at it and pulling upwards so that it reaches over there. And eventually, after 2 or 3 rounds around all the beads, you'll end up with this. You'll also have an easier time if you work with the flats of the Zoliduos instead of the rounds, and they'll kind of flap out better. For example, this is what I've done with the flat side, and the arc is kind of wider when it comes to the shape compared to how this one sits. You can kind of see the difference there. But it's ultimately up to you. You can work with either side. If you also don't like this expansive thread bridge here, you can add an extra size 15 seed bead instead if you want to work with the rounds. But if you want to work with the flats facing up, you only need one seed bead. So next what I'm going to do is just travel down through that size 15 that we've added, and then back through the Zoliduo. I want to be on this orientation because I want to get to the top hole of this Zoliduo. So like I've talked in the previous video, I want to have it so that I have my thread covering the top side over here, because if I try to go to the top hole from this side, that thread is just going to show in this gap here because of the way the bead curves. So this is where I'm going to end up with, and then I'm going to make 2 more of these shapes. I'm going to do 1 more in the right orientation, and then I'm going to make 1 using left-oriented Zoliduos. To give you an example of using it with 2 seed beads, this is what you would start off with after making the initial Zoliduo ring. So basically you just add 2 15s, the 3mm pearl, 2 size 15s, do that all the way around, and then step up so you end up at the 3mm pearl and continue as normal. That's if you want to keep with the round side of the Zoliduos. And here I have my 3 little doodads. So next we're going to attach it to the back of our giant piece. So coming from 1 petal top side of our Zoliduo, I'm going to add 1 3mm fire polish bead. Then I'm going to figure out where this is going to end up. So since I'm coming out of the left side, I want to situate this so that the petal fits in between 2 of the fire polish beads that are on the bezel of the 14mm. So since I'm here, I'm going to pass it up through a fire polish bead here. Then I'm going to go down through that mini duo and then up through the next fire polish bead. Now make sure your thread doesn't end up in between the Zoliduos on the 14mm, but if the thread or the needle is just making you go through it, just pass your needle back through those 2 Zoliduos. Then add 1 more 3mm fire polish bead and pass through the other side of the free-floating Zoliduo. Then you'll reinforce by passing through all of those beads once more. Then you're good to end and cut your threads. So that is what you end up with. So we're going to do pretty much the same thing to anchor the next one, but what we're going to do is we're going to pick out the one that has the opposite orientation of the first one that we added. And we're going to add it right next to the other one. So when we add it, we see that these 2 fire polish beads have been taken over. We're going to move over and anchor it on to the next set of 2 fire polish beads. So, coming from the top hole, I've added 1 more fire polish bead. I'm going to take a look at where the thread is and cinch it in between the next set of 2 fire polish beads. So from here I'm going to pass through the fire polish, basically in the opposite direction of our first flower that we've attached. Through the mini duo, the next fire polish, back through the Zoliduos if your thread gets trapped there. Add one more 3mm fire polish bead, then pass through the opposite side of the Zoliduo that you started with. Then you can go ahead, reinforce, and that is what you end up with. Once you have reinforced your insides, you can go ahead and end your tail and working threads. But I have done is attached a new thread in an area here, because if you notice, if we rotate and push these through slightly, you'll notice that one Zoliduo on this side fits inside 2 petals of the other one. We kind of want to make that together. So I've made sure I've added a new thread, but if you can orient your working thread or tail in the right direction, this is where you want to end up with. So I have 1, 2, 3. All I'm going to do is pass through each one of them and zip up that gap. Since this part is going to be pretty well hidden, I'm going to break my rule of going around the opposite side of the Zoliduo and pass through the bottom hole of the bead that we finally end up with. Then I'm going to pull tight to make sure everything is cinched close together. Now we can follow the line, go back up through this Zoliduo, over and around. If we want to reinforce, then we can end this thread. Then once you're finished with that side, then you're going to add your third and final piece to the opposite side. After that, you're going to be ready for the fringe. Now to start your fringe, I've got a length of thread with a stop bead on it. And we're going to start off by threading 3 size 15s, a drop bead, 3 size 15s, and letting that fall to the end of the thread. Then I'm taking a right side Zoliduo. I'm going to pass through the bottom hole of it, pull that down to my thread, like that, and then I'm going to move to the top hole of my bead and pull it down so it sits tightly. Then I'm going to take a left Zoliduo, pass through the bottom hole, then the top hole, and pull it all the way down so that it sits against the right one that we added. Then to continue the pattern, I'm going to add a right side Zoliduo and pass through the bottom hole. Basically, we thread it from inside out. Pull that down and then move up to the top hole, outside in. Take another left one, go inside out from the bottom hole, pull it down, and go through the top hole. You're going to repeat this pattern so that it forms this back and forth wave-like pattern until you have the length of your fringe. Now, I'm going to be using 9 beads. I've used 7 in this one, but whatever length you would like to do, repeat until you have an odd number of Zoliduo beads. As you're doing this, you want to make sure your tension is tight so that these stick immediately next to each other, so that it makes your life a little bit easier when you're attaching everything together. And that we end up like this. Finally, I'm going to add 1 size 15, 1 fire polish, 1 size 15. Then I'm going to pull that down, my thread. Then we're going to attach it to our main piece. I'm going to flip it over, so as I'm attaching this, I'm going to pay attention to my mini duos on this side. I'm going to be using the outer holes of the mini duos to anchor my fringe in place. I'm basically going to be picking out a central 4 set of beads. Basically, I'm going to attach it to one, leave these 2 in the center open, and attach it to another one. I have my thread here, and since the curl is going towards the Zoliduo on the outside, like this, I'm going to go thread outside in on my mini duo. Like that, so that our fringe is attached here. Then I'm going to basically do the reverse and repeat my pattern. So I'm going to start off by adding 1 size 15, 1 3mm, 1 size 15. And the first tendril I started with a right side Zoliduo, but now I'm going to start with a left side Zoliduo so that the orientation is reversed. And when I did the tendrils going up, I went from bottom to tip. This time I'm going to go from tip to bottom. I'm going to always hold my Zoliduos the flat facing up so I know what I'm doing. And I'm going to go from inside out when I'm threading the left one. So I have that going on. Going to pull it down and then thread through the bottom hole, outside in. Then I'm going to take my right Zoliduo, going inside out with the flat facing me. Then from the bottom hole, outside in, and pull that down. Now I have a left Zoliduo, and I'm going to thread it on, inside out, then outside in. We're going to repeat in that manner until we have 9 Zoliduos on our chain. Then we'll add our 3 size 15s, our teardrop, and our 3 size 15s. And that is what we end up with. You'll notice how we've basically mirrored the 2 fringe pieces. Now once again, you're going to want to make sure your tension is really super tight on this piece. And be especially careful towards the top where the joint is. So be sure before you do the next step, you're going to pull each and every one of the Zoliduos up to make sure you have no gaps in spacing. What we're going to do is pass back through. We have our 3, our drop and our 3. We're just going to pass back through the bottom hole of the Zoliduo at the tip and pull tight. And definitely pull to make sure everything is cinched together up here. So we have our little droplet hanging on. I'm going to reinforce this once more, just to make it nice and tight, especially if you're using heavy drops. Now, in order to reinforce this, I want to change directions in my thread. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by coming out of the Zoliduo bottom. I'm going to add a half hitch knot right where the seed bead starts. Then once you have your knot in place, you're going to pass back through the Zoliduo, and the knot will keep it in place so that you can change your direction without anything slipping apart. Now you're just going to travel up, down the length of your fringe, through the size 15, the fire polish the size 15, through that mini duo, and all the way down. And before you do that, you can also undo your tail end and your stop bead, put your needle on your tail, then repeat to make the loop around the drop, like so. You'll pass through that once more, and then you can reinforce, and then you can end your tail end there. Once everything is reinforced, we're going to add a new thread and do the same thing, but this time we're going to skip 1, 2, 3 mini duos. We want to attach our fringe over here. So, for example, I have my new tendril. I'm going to skip 1, 2, 3 and attach right here. So it sits like that, and continue my fringe. And that is what you end up with. Now what's left is to attach the barrette piece. So I've added a new thread, somewhat in the center of the mini duos on the back of the bezel. I'm using the outer holes of this one because it's real hard to get into the center ones because they're so tightly compacted. I somehow did manage to do it, so if you really want neater ends, have at it, but be prepared to shed some tears, because that way sucks. So anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 1 fire polish bead, and then pass back through that mini duo I'm coming out of, then back through that fire polish bead I just added. I'm going to thread on my barrette, and another fire polish bead, then pass back down through the hole of the barrette. Then I'm going to add another fire polish bead and move through the top hole of a mini duo across the way. That is what I end up with. Then I'm going to go downwards through that fire polish bead so that I end up with it crossing on top of the mini duo. Then I'm going to go back through the barrette, pull it snug, then go through that bead on top of the barrette, back down the hole of the barrette, then through the fire polish bead from the side that doesn't have any threads coming out of it yet. So we're basically making a figure 8 and anchoring the barrette in place. Now you're going to repeat that once or twice to cinch this in place, then add a bit of glue right on top of the bead on the barrette. And after fighting valiantly, that is what you end up with. Like I said, you don't have to use it as a hair clip if you don't want to struggle and argue, but using some of these techniques, I hope you've learned a few things about the Zoliduo bead and what you can kind of do, some new techniques. You can use this as a pendant, a very nice asymmetrical pendant. You can hang some chain here. You can use longer tendrils, you can use shorter tendrils, and yes, even those little flower pieces would be cute as like a little ring or something. I think they would look quite lovely. But yes, I think that will do it from me. Be sure to check out part 1 if you have not done so already, and check out Scarab Beads and their channel and see what other jewelry tutorials they have in store for you. And yes, be sure to like up this video and subscribe if you want to see more bullshit from me. Be sure to join us on our Facebook group as well, Creations from Lessons with Odin. All pertinent links will be down below. Thank you guys so much for joining me, and of course, if there's anything I need to be trying out right now, feel free to let me know down below. And I will see you next time.